Now at stage 12, paragraph page 1160. Okay, here we go. And our
Yes.
last headword was squelch, newer type of lesson. Okay, so let's
Yes.
start with revision. 60, 54. Okay, here we go. First question. Okay, so why do we sip a hot drink rather than gulp it down? Why do we sip a hot drink rather than gulp it down? We sip a hot drink
We sip hot
rather
drink
than gulp it
rather
down
than gulp it down
because
because it's dangerous for our mouth.
very good. Okay. Next, is there a great variety in terms of size between different breeds of dog? Is there a great variety in terms of size between different breeds of dog? Yes, there is
Yes,
a great
there is
variety
a great
in terms
variety
of size
in terms of size
between different breeds
between
of dog.
different breeds of dog.
Very good. What do we mean by smuggling? What do we mean by smuggling? By smuggling,
By
we
smuggling,
mean
we
taking
mean
something
taking
into
something
or out a country
into or out a
illegally.
country illegally.
Very good. Is it considered a very serious offense to smuggle drugs such as heroin and cocaine into your country? Is it considered a very serious offense to smuggle drugs such as heroin and cocaine into your country? Yes, it's
Yes,
considered
it's
a very
considered
serious
a
offense
very severe
to
offense
smuggle drugs
to smuggle
such as
drugs
heroin
such as
and
heroin
cocaine into my
and
country.
cocaine into my country.
Very good. What do we mean by a drug company? What do we mean by a drug company? By a drug company,
By a drug
we mean a
company,
company
we mean a
that
company
produces drugs
that produces
for
drugs
use in medical
for
treatment.
use in medical treatment.
Where could give me a sentence with the words vary in it, used in with the meaning of exact or extreme. Give me a sentence with the word vary in it, used with the meaning of exact or extreme. You're the very person
You're the very
I'm
person
looking for.
I'm looking
The
for.
car was parked
The car
at
was
the
parked
very end of the
at
street.
the very end of the street.
Very good. What do we mean when we say that a man fought his enemies one by one? What do we mean when we say that a man fought his enemies one by one? When we say
When
that
we
a
say
man
that a
fought his
man
enemies
fought his
one by
enemies
one, we
one by
mean
one,
he
we
fought his
mean he
enemies
fought his
one
enemies
at a time,
one at a time,
not all together.
not all together.
Very good. Okay, next. Okay, let's skip that. Let's move on. Writing. Here we go. Where are articles normally published? Where are articles normally published? Articles are normally
Articles
published
are normally
in a
published
magazine,
in a magazine,
newspaper, or journal,
newspaper, or a
or on
journal,
a website,
or on a
such
website,
as a blog.
such as a blog.
Ragged, how can we decide whether to write an article in a formal, neutral, or informal style? How can we decide whether to write an article in a formal, neutral, or informal style? We can decide
We can
whether
decide
to write
whether
an
to
article
write an
in a
article
formal,
in a
neutral,
formal,
or
neutral,
informal
or
style
informal
by
style
thinking about
by thinking about
where it will be
where
published
it will be published
and who will read it.
and who will read it.
Ragged, why should we try to make an article interesting to read? Why should we try to make an article interesting to read? We should try
We
to
should
make
try
an
to
article
make an article
interesting to read
interesting to read
because the reader
because the
has
reader
no obligation
has no
to keep
obligation
reading.
to keep reading.
Ragged, what should we put at the start of an article? What should we put at the start of an article? At the start of
At the
an
start
article,
of an
we
article,
should put an
we should put
eye-catching
an
title.
type
Eye-catching
an
title. Eye
sorry,
eye-catching title.
eye-catching title.
Very good. One more. At the start of
At
an
the start
article,
of an article,
we should put
we
an
should put
eye-catching
an
title
eye-catching title
and an interesting
and an
first
interesting
sentence or
first sentence
introduction
or
paragraph.
introduction paragraph.
Very good. Why is it a good idea to use the pronoun you where appropriate? Why is it a good idea to use the pronoun you where appropriate? It's a good idea
It's a good
to
idea
use the
to
pronoun
use
you
the pronoun you
where appropriate
where
because
appropriate
it helps
because it
to keep the
helps
reader
to
interested.
keep the reader interested.
Very good. If a barbecue fire gets out of control and sets some trees alight, which emergency service would you call? If a barbecue fire gets out of control and sets some trees alight, which emergency service would you call? If a barbecue fire
If a barbecue
got
fire
out of control
got out of control
and set some trees
and
alight,
set some trees
I'd
alight,
call the fire brigade.
I call the fire
Brigade.
brigade.
Very good. One more. If a barbecue fire
If a barbecue
got
fire
out of control
got out of
and
control
set some trees
and
alight,
set some trees
I'd
alight,
call the fire
I
brigade.
call the fire brigade.
Very good. Sometimes in a bus, we see a notice saying, please do not alight until the bus stops. What does that mean? Sometimes in a bus, we see a notice saying, please do not alight until the bus stops. What does that mean? A notice in a
A
bus
notice
that
in a
says,
bus that
please do
says,
not alight
please do not alight
until the bus stops
until the
means,
bus stops.
please do
Means,
not get off
please do not get
until
off
the bus stops.
until the bus stops.
Very good. If one football player tackles another in a dangerous fashion, what happens? If one football player tackles another in a dangerous fashion, what happens? If one football
If one
player
football player
tackles another
tackles
in a
another
dangerous fashion,
in a dangerous
the
fashion,
player is
the
reprimanded
player is reprimanded
or punished.
or punished.
Very good. Have you ever been in a situation where you've been forced to resort to violence? Have you ever been in a situation where you've been forced to resort to violence? Yes or no?
No,
I've never been
I've
in a
never been
situation
in a situation
where I've been forced
where I've been
to
forced
resort to
to
violence.
resort to violence.
Very good. Can you foresee a time in the future when government might resort to banning the private use of cars in an effort to tackle the world's climate problems? Can you foresee a time in the future where government might resort to banning the private use of cars in an effort to tackle the world's climate problems? Yes or no?
No,
I can't foresee a
I can't
time in the
foresee a
future
time in the
when
future
governments might
when
resort
government
to
might
banning the
resort
private
to banning
use
the private
of
use
cars in an
of
effort
cars
to
in an
tackle
effort to
the
tackle
world's climate
the
problems.
world's climate problems.
Very good. Have you ever bid for anything successfully in an auction? Have you ever bid for anything successfully in an auction? Yes or no?
No,
I have never bid
I have never
for
been
anything
for
successfully
anything
in an
successfully
auction.
in an auction.
Very good. What's the meaning of the word undo? What's the meaning of the word undo? The meaning of the
The
word
meaning
undo
of the word
is
undo
excessive.
is excessive.
Very good. Give me a sentence with the word unduly in it. Give me a sentence with the word unduly in it, please. I was not
I
unduly
was not
worried about
unworried
the fact
about the
that I
fact
hadn't yet
that I
received
hadn't
an
yet
answer
received
to my letter.
an answer to my letter.
Very good. What does the verb hurtle mean? What does the verb hurtle mean? The verb hurtle
The verb
means to
hurtle
move
means
very quickly
to move very
in
quickly
an uncontrolled
in an
and
uncontrolled
usually dangerous
and
manner.
usually dangerous manner.
Give me an example. Give me an example, please. The horse and cart
The horse and
came
cart
hurtling
came
round the
hurtling
corner
round the
at a
corner
frightening pace.
at a frightening pace.
Very good. Would you ever consider adopting a stray dog or cat? Would you ever consider adopting a stray dog or cat? Yes or no?
No,
I'd never consider
I never consider
adopting a stray dog or
adopting a
cat.
stray dog or cat.
Very good. If you walk through a deep puddle, would your shoes and socks get soggy? If you walk through a deep puddle, would your shoes and socks get soggy? Yes. If I walk
Yes, if
through
I
a
walk
deep puddle,
through a deep
my
puddle,
shoes and socks
my shoes and
would
socks
get soggy.
would get soggy.
Very good. What kind of noise would your shoes make? And what kind of noise would your shoes make? My shoes would
My
make
shoes
a
would make
squelching noise.
a squelching noise.
Very good. And that's the end of our revision. Let's have new word.
Yes.
Very good. Okay, so let's have the first set of words. Okay, first one is startle.
Uh,
Startle.
Turtle.
Startle, like to be
Turtle.
surprised, like startle. Okay, next, start.
Start.
Absorb.
Observe.
Very good. Okay, listen. Startle is a verb. It means to cause a person or animal to feel sudden shock or sudden alarm. For example, babies are easily startled by sudden loud noises. Start is a sudden movement one makes when they get startled. For example, I saw my friend sleeping and when I tapped her shoulder, she woke with a start. Absorb is an adjective. It means very interested in something and not paying attention to anything else. Absorb. For example, if I were absorbed in a book and someone behind me tapped me on the shoulder, it'd give me a start. Okay, so let's practice. Are you easily startled by sudden loud noises? Are you easily startled by sudden loud noises? Yes or no?
Yes.
I'm easily startled
I'm easily
by
startled
sudden loud
by
noises.
sudden loud noises.
Where if you were absorbed in a book and someone behind you tapped you on the shoulder, would it give you a start? If you're absorbed in a book and someone behind you tapped you on the shoulder, would it give you a start? Yes. If I were
Yes,
absorbed
if I
in a
were
book
absorbed
and
in a book
someone behind
and
me
someone behind
tapped me
me
on the shoulder,
pat me on the shoulder,
it'd give me a start.
it gave me on the
It'd give me
it give me
a start.
at start.
A start. Very good. One more. Yes. If I were
Yes,
absorbed
if I were
in a
absorbed
book and
in a
someone
book
behind
and
me
someone
tapped
behind
me
me
on the shoulder,
tap me on the shoulder,
it'd give me a start.
it will give me a start.
Very good. Next, repeat. Impulse.
Impulse.
Think over.
Think over.
Very good. Okay, listen. Impulse is a noun. It means a sudden, strong desire to do something. To do something on an impulse or on a sudden impulse means to do it suddenly without thinking about it first. For example, I sometimes buy useless things on impulse and realize later that what I bought is of no importance to me. No. Think over is a phrasal verb. It means to think about something for a period of time, especially in an effort to understand or make a decision about it. For example, some people do things on impulse and others think things over first. Let's practice. Are you the kind of person who does things on impulse or do you tend to think things over first? Are you the kind of person who does things on impulse or do you tend to think things over first? I'm the kind of person
I'm the kind of
who
person
does things
who does things
on impulse or no?
who no,
Okay, one more. I'm not the kind of person
I'm not the kind of
who
person
does things on impulse.
who does things on
I
impulse.
tend to think
I
things
tend to
over
think
first.
things over first,
Much better. Over first. Think
over
things
first,
over first. Very,
thinks over
very
first.
good. One more. I'm not the kind of
I'm
person
not the kind
who
of
does
person
things on
who does
impulse.
things on
I tend
impulse.
to
I
think
tend to
things over first.
think things over first.
Very good. So many letter T. Very good. Okay, next. Repeat random.
Random.
Very good. Again, listen. The word random means without aim or purpose, or without conscious selection, just random. For example, during his show, the magician got random members of the audience to help him on stage. So he just picked anybody, random. Let's practice. What does the word random mean? What does the word random mean? The word random
The
means
word random
without
means
aim or
without
purpose,
aim or
or without
purpose
conscious
or
selection.
without conscious selection.
Right? Give me an example. Give me an example, please. During his show,
During
the
his show,
magician got
the
random
magician
members
got random
of the
members
audience to
of
help
the
him on
audience to
stage.
help him on stage.
Very good. Next, repeat anticipate.
Anticipate.
Prosperity.
Prosperity.
Prosperous.
Prosperous.
Very good. Okay, listen. The word anticipate is a verb. It means to think of something that will or might happen in the future. Anticipate. For example, the hotel anticipated my every need. I didn't have to ask for anything because they already provided it. Prosperity is a noun. It is the state of being successful, usually by making a lot of money. For example, prosperity in a country is possible if all the people in it work together. Prosperous is an adjective. It means having success, usually by making a lot of money. For example, I anticipate that my country's prosperity will rise in the next 10 years or so. I don't anticipate that this country will become less prosperous. Let's practice. Do you anticipate that your country's prosperity will rise in the next 10 years or so? Or do you anticipate that the country will become less prosperous? Do you anticipate that your country's prosperity will rise in the next 10 years or so? Or do you anticipate that your country will become less prosperous? I anticipate that
And anticipate
my
that
country's
my
prosperity
country's prosperity
will rise in the next
will
10
rise
years or
in the
so.
next 10 years or so.
Very good. Next, repeat. Stud.
Start.
Very good. Okay, listen. The word stud is a noun. It means one of the set of small pointed piece of metal or plastic that are attached to the bottom of a running shoe, football shoe, etc. to stop you from slipping over. For example, football boots have studs on the bottom to ensure that they grip the ground well and prevent players from slipping over. Let's practice. Why do football boots have studs on the bottom? Why do football boots have studs on the bottom? Football boots have
Football
studs on
boots
the bottom
have stats on the
to
bottom
ensure that they
to
grip
ensure
the
that
ground
they
well
grip the
and
ground well
prevent players
and prevent
from
players
slipping over.
from slipping over.
Very good. Next, repeat those.
Those,
Next one is doze off.
those off.
Very good. Okay, listen, doze is a verb. It means to sleep lightly, especially for a short period of time. For example, he was dozing on the sofa when I got home. Doze off is a phrasal verb. It means to fall asleep, especially for a short period of time. For example, I have sometimes dozed off while watching a very boring film at the cinema. Let's practice. Have you ever dozed off while watching a film at the cinema? Have you ever dozed off while watching a film at the cinema? Yes or no?
Yes,
I have sometimes
I have
dozed off
sometimes
while
dozed
watching a
off
film
while watching a
at the
film
cinema.
at the cinema.
Very good. Next, repeat will.
Well,
Very good. Okay, listen. The word will is used to express desire, choice, willingness, or voluntary. The opposite of doing something voluntarily is doing something against your will. For example, I'd say that I had a very strong will, especially when learning new things, language, etc. Let's practice. What's the opposite of doing something voluntarily? What's the opposite of doing something voluntarily? The opposite of
the
doing
opposite
something
of doing something
voluntarily is
voluntarily
against your will.
is against your will.
Very good. Would you say you had a very strong will? Would you say you had a very strong will? Yes or no?
Yes,
I'd say I had
I'd
a
say
very
I
strong
had
will.
a very strong will.
Very good. Next, repeat munch,
Munch,
nibble.
nibble.
Very good. Okay, listen. The word munch and nibble are verbs. The difference between the verb munch and nibble is that when we munch food, we move our jaws a great deal, rather like a cow eating grass. Whereas when we nibble food, we take tiny bites, rather like a mouse. For example, we munch on popcorn during the movie. We nibble cheese and crackers. Okay, let's practice. What's the difference between the verbs munch and nibble? What's the difference between the verb munch and nibble? The difference between
The
the
difference
verbs
between
munch
the
and nibble
verbs munch and
is that
nibble
when we
is
munch
that
food,
when we
we
munch
move
food,
our
we
jaws a
move
great
our
deal,
jaws a
rather
great
like a
deal,
cow
rather like a
eating a
cow
grass.
eating a
Where,
grass.
whereas
Where,
when
whereas
we nibble food,
when we
we
nibble
take
food,
tiny bites,
we take
rather
tiny
like a
bite,
mouse.
rather like a mouse.
Very good. Next, repeat estate,
Estate,
vendor,
vendor,
vendor. Okay, listen. Estate is a noun. It means all of someone's property, such as some land, houses, money, businesses, industry, etc. For example, there are some industrial estates on the outskirts of this town. An estate agent, for example, is a person whose job is about selling or finding a buyer for estate properties of other people to another. Vendor is a noun. It is someone who sells something, like a seller. For example, when purchasing property in my country, buyers usually use an estate agent rather than deal directly with vendors. Let's practice. Are there any industrial estates on the outskirts of your town? Are there any industrial estates on the outskirts of your town? Yes or no?
Oh, no,
There aren't any
there aren't
industrial
an
estates
industrial
on the
estate
outskirts of my
on the
town.
outskirts of my town.
Very good. When purchasing property in your country, do buyers usually use an estate agent rather than deal directly with vendors? When purchasing property in your country, do buyers usually use an estate agent rather than deal directly with vendors? Yes or no?
Yes,
When purchasing property
when
in my
purchasing
country,
property in my
buyers
country,
usually use
buyers
an
usually
estate
use
agent
an estate
rather
agent
than deal directly
rather than deal
with
directly
vendors.
with vendors.
Very good. Okay, so now let's move on to reading.
Yes,
Okay, so our reading is at stage 10, paragraph page 935. Okay, and our last headword was nylon. Okay, start with headword despair.
despair. Please wait a moment.
Okay.
So